Hello everybody, it's ProfRich, and today I'm going to answer the question, can you learn a language just by studying? So recently I made a video with my top 5 tips for learning languages. For tip 4, I chose my words very poorly, and I said, studious people learn languages better than sociable people. Now, on reflection, I could have said that in a more precise way. And after correctly being questioned about this by one of my subscribers, and they were absolutely right, to point out that it seemed like I was saying studying is the way to learn a language. And that worries me because I think that message is damaging. Studying alone is not the way to learn a language. And in fact, in many places around the world, particularly parts of Asia, I'm thinking specifically about China, Japan, Vietnam. The emphasis in the language learning classroom in schools is very much on study skills, on writing, grammar exercises, learning vocabulary, and there's very little emphasis on speaking. And that's a big problem for those learners. Can you learn a language without socializing with other people in that language? The idea of learning a language just by studying is a very old one, actually, and it goes back to something called the grammar translation method, which is a pre-1900s method for learning languages, which academics used to learn things like Latin and ancient Greek. It's a very old method which doesn't involve a lot of interaction, and actually that wasn't the intention of that method. That method was meant so that people could translate textbooks. So that's a pure study method, and that's where that gets. Now let's go to the other side of the coin. There is a method called the direct method. Now, the direct method actually came as an answer to the grammar translation method. It was like a reaction to it. And the direct method, which came about around about the 1940s, I believe. The direct method just involves speaking. And it would be a teacher speaking and asking questions and the students responding by speaking. And you kind of go through the same conversations again and again and again. You can have a look on YouTube and type direct method and you'll see people doing it. And the thing about the direct method is it's very good at getting people quickly from absolute beginner to about pre-intermediate or intermediate. But it doesn't really do well at getting people beyond that, because in the direct method, there is no study. There's no vocabulary notebook. There's no reflection. In fact, they discourage reflection. The idea is to be in the moment and just talk, right? So we can see that these two approaches, both at their extremes, they both have problems. And what we need is to bring these ideas together, which actually is what happened in the 1970s, 1980s, and then 1990s, when we saw 3 language methods emerge, which was Suggestopedia, the silent way, and community language learning. These later come together in the 90s to form communicative language teaching. Communicative language teaching is that we spend the whole class speaking, but we actually also, we talk about parts of the language. We engage with the language. So we talk about pronunciation, we talk about vocabulary, we talk about phrases in the class. And therefore, speaking, communicating becomes both the objective, but also the medium or the method by which we learn. So, what do I actually think, and what was I trying to say? Right. Well, first, studying is a component of language learning. What if we take the extreme example of someone who socializes a lot with English people but doesn't study at all? How will they do with language learning? Well, without any kind of reflection and without a little notebook and without writing down phrases and thinking about that and thinking about the language, they won't do that well. I can say that confidently. I've had students who've lived in English-speaking countries for many years, and their language learning has stopped. Some of them are about pre-intermediate, some of them intermediate, but their language learning doesn't progress because there's no reflection, there's no cognition. You have to engage with the language. Just by socializing alone, you won't necessarily improve your language learning. Here's an analogy. If you're learning to play an instrument, which I think is one of the best analogies for language learning, if you sit with your guitar and you just kind of play along with the guitar for a few hours, just messing about, and then you put the guitar down, right? You could do that every day for years and see very little improvement in your playing. That's the practice, right? That's the practical side. That's like speaking to people. So why don't you see any improvement? Well, because improvement requires more than just practice. It requires some kind of intellectual engagement. It requires processes like reflection. It requires analysis even. For example, with the guitar, you might think, well, maybe I need to learn a new scale or some new chords. These are intellectual things. These are things that you might have to study, right? So this was the point that I was trying to make. That if you go out into the world, assuming you go out into the world and you speak to people in English and you're getting lots of speaking practice, but you're not seeing a lot of improvement in your English, what you may need to do is to start engaging a bit more intellectually with that. Get a notebook, start making notes of useful phrases while you're out and about. May sound a bit weird, but I've seen people do it with great success. They go out, they get their little notebook, go out, meet their friends, have a chat, occasionally take a note of something that someone says. And people are fine about this. You just be, oh, what did you just say? That sounded great. You make a note of it. There was a guy who I interviewed about this on my teaching podcast. His name was Chris Lonsdale. And he learned Mandarin Chinese in about 6 months. He went to China. He didn't know Chinese. He hadn't learned other languages. And he learned Mandarin Chinese in about 6 months. Now, a big part of that was talking to people. It's going and speaking and socializing. But an even bigger part of that was his study. He had his book, his little notebook, And as he was speaking to people, he would be noting things down. And he even would take his notebook and give it to the other person and say, write that for me, right? Basically, he had a study system in place which strongly complemented his socializing. That's really the point that I wanted to make. And I think on reflection, what I should have said is both studying and socializing are key components which complement each other. Both studying and socializing are key components which complement each other. One without the other doesn't work. Practice without reflection, without intellectual engagement, sees little improvement. Intellectualization, study, and no practice means that you never try to do the things you've learnt about, and so you forget them, or you don't realize how they really work. You don't make the connection between action and understanding. So how can this information be useful to you as a language learner? Well, you need to make a decision about yourself as a language learner, and you need to think, what am I doing a lot of right now? And what am I doing not so much of? And am I making progress? It's always useful as learners to examine our progress and to examine the things we do in order to find better ways of progressing, in order to orient ourselves towards more success in that area. So, first of all, are you happy with your progress in English right now? And if not, then let's look at what you're doing. Are you speaking a lot of English with people? If the answer is no, then you need to find a way to start speaking English with people. If you are speaking English with people a lot and you're not happy with your progress, what else are you doing to improve your English? Do you have a notebook? Are you actively trying to learn vocabulary and putting that into place? Now, the interesting thing about the subscriber who made this comment, I'm fairly certain that there's someone who takes new vocabulary from, for example, these videos and English learning videos, and then goes out and speaks to people and uses that vocabulary. And that is the synthesis of both study, learning, and practice speaking. And that's really what I should have said. So, in some ways, this is an apology for expressing inaccurately what I wanted to say in that last video at point 4. I'm not going to take the video down because 1, the other 5 points are well expressed, and 2, it took me about 20 hours to edit that video together, so that's staying. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Put your comments down below, smash that like button, share with your friends, and I will catch you